All right, kids, here we go with our first round of intervals. We'll be discussing 3 intervals today, and the first interval is not really an interval at all. We talked about how an interval is defined as the space between any 2 notes, but if those notes are both the same note, we still call that an interval, and it's called a unison, or more appropriately, a perfect prime. Isn't that pretty? So the distance between any note and itself, so 2 A's, 2 B flats, whatever you want to call it. This can be played melodically by any voice, that means one note after another, and it can be played harmonically by any 2 voices. When we talk about using voices in music, we don't necessarily mean the human voice. This could be an instrument, it could be a human voice, it could be a lot of different things. We just use the term voice as a general term. Here's an example of a perfect prime. We've got 2 B naturals. I can't play that harmonically on the piano because I only have 1 key, but I can play that melodically. If I had 2 different instruments, I could play both of those at the same time, and we'd call that playing in unison. Moving up from there, we've got the smallest interval we have in Western music. It's called the minor second. Some other terms that we have for it is half step, and a few less common terms are semitone or half tone. A half step is a minor second, and it's between any 2 adjacent keys on the piano. Most often that's from a white key to a black key, or a black key to a white key. There are 2 exceptions on the piano keyboard where it's from a white key to a white key, and we'll look at that in just a moment. When you're writing a second, it always has to be with adjacent notes in the alphabet. So for instance, A to B or C to D. It would not be considered a second if you went A to C or A to F or something strange like that. It has to be adjacent notes because that's where it gets the second, 1 to 2. This is probably the most dissonant sound that we have in music that we'll be studying. Because the notes are just so close together, the sound waves really clash. Here's an example. If we start on the note F and we go to the next adjacent note, which is going to be this key, we get this sound. That would be written from an F to a G flat because we need to use adjacent letter names. We could not go from F to F sharp, and if you're not sure what those mean, the next video we're going to look at enharmonic notes and sharps and flats and things. But the main thing to take away is that it needs to be from an F to a G. So the top one is written correctly for our purposes, the bottom one is not. Look at that natural sharp thing, very strange. Let's not deal with that. Here's another example. If we start on the note E. Now notice we don't have a black key to skip over there, so we have to actually skip up to the next white key, which is F. Very dissonant sound. If you look to the right of the keyboard on your screen there, you'll see another naturally occurring half step, and that's from B to C. Here's what that E to F would look like in notation. You notice that you're going from the bottom line to the bottom space. A second will always be from a line to the next space, either above or below it. A major second is the distance equal to 2 half steps. So it's twice as large as the minor second. And this is also known as a whole step or sometimes called a whole tone. This is, like I said, oh, that's on there twice, not sure why. This would be between 2 adjacent keys on the piano if we're moving from white to white or black to black. But of course, because of that naturally occurring half step, we're going to have a few exceptions to this. Again, since it's a second, we're still going to use adjacent notes of the alphabet. And this is a somewhat dissonant sound. This is certainly not as dissonant as the minor second, but it's not a steady sound. There's a lot of clashing waves when you hear this sound. So here's our first example. We're going to start on an F, and we're going to move up to the next adjacent white key, which is a G. F to G, there's our alphabetical, and it sounds like this. And if we looked at the notation, it would look like this, F to G there. And we're still using adjacent letter names. We're going from a space to a line for a second. Here's another example. If we start on E, we can't just go to the next white key. We've got to skip up 2 half steps. So that puts us at this black key. And that would be written from an E to an F sharp. We would not be able to call that a G flat. And again, if you're not sure about the keyboard or what these flats mean, that will be explained in the next video. The important thing to remember is that we can't go from E to G because that skips the note F. And if you look at that bottom one, you're going from a line to a line, so that would be a third, not a second. And that is, again, that's a forthcoming video. So one more time, we've got the perfect prime or the unison. We've got the minor second, which would also be called a half step, very dissonant sound, and the major second, which is a slightly larger interval and somewhat dissonant. And we just want to really pay attention to how those notes are written on the staff so that they are actual seconds and not a different type of interval.